meeting of the Planning Commission for Monday, December 4th, 2023. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from November 6th, 2023. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes and are good with any?
Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 6th, 2023?
Motion. You have a second.
Second. They are approved.
And Claire did notify me this afternoon that she wouldn't be here tonight.
Oh, okay. So we do not have a county update.
No.
Do we have something from them at all? Or
It should be in your packet.
yes. Should I read that?
If everyone had a chance to look at it, we don't need to.
Okay.
We don't need to go through it.
Then good. Moving on. So the next thing is the business agenda, the rezoning petition recommendation for the 7306 Springfield Avenue. We have the staff report.
So I'll just go through, as you guys saw the staff report, it's pretty much the same as last time, but I did add a few things, so if it's okay with everyone else, I'll just touch on the few additions I made as opposed to just going through the whole thing in the interest of time. So the first addition I made was in the information and background section, I just included our code's definition of service garage because it wasn't in the previous staff report, and I feel like that's important to have in there. So our code defines a service garage as a garage other than a residential garage where motor vehicles, trailers, or other type of equipment are stored, equipped for operation, repaired, kept for remuneration, hire, or sale. And then moving on, so it was requested last time that we just provide some additional information as well on potential text amendment. So I added some information about what a text amendment might look like, what a conditional use is, and the BCA's process and or role in that. So I'm going to run through that real quick as well. So again, that would be under a recommendation to modify the business local zone to allow for an automobile service garage as a conditional use. So basically what that means is the text amendment would simply add service garage to the list of conditional uses in the business local zone. So I included all the permitted, conditional, and prohibited uses of that zone along with the staff report this month. So if you just take service garage and put it in as the next bullet point under conditional uses, that's what the text amendment would look like essentially. What a conditional use is, so that's defined in our town code as uses which are specified for Board of Appeals approval prior to authorization, and which uses after public hearing may be approved conditionally or disapproved in accordance with Chapter 180-105, which is just the BZA sharing orders. So essentially what that means is if this were to become a conditional use in the business local zone, then the Board of Zoning Appeals or the BZA would have an additional review, and in that review they would determine whether or not that use is appropriate at that property. And they would also be able to apply special conditions to the use on that property. So that's when we start talking about things like sight lines and screening of materials. So they'll be able to apply those conditions. And then Planning Commission will then be able to make sure those conditions are being met and enforced through the site plan process. And then the factors that the BZA considers when they make their decisions. So I wanted to include these because they're a lot of the same concerns that I've heard members of the Planning Commission bring up. So the BZA, when they make their determination, they would consider the number of people residing or working in the immediate area concerned, the orderly growth of Sykesville, traffic conditions and facilities, the effect of such use upon the peaceful enjoyment of people in their homes, the conservation of property values, the effects of odors, dust, gas, smoke, fumes, vibrations, glare, and noise upon the use of the surrounding property values, the most appropriate use of the land and structure, decisions of the courts, the purpose of these regulations set forth herein, and the type and kind of structures in the vicinity where public gatherings may be held, such as schools, churches, and the like. So again, staff is just asking Planning Commission this evening to give direction on how our legal counsel could draft a report, a recommendation report, and then that report will then be ratified in the following meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Would like to invite anybody with the 7306 Springfield Avenue to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm back. It's Kelly Miller, 73 East Main Street, Westminster, Maryland, 21157. I'm here tonight on the applicants, or on behalf of the applicants, Tom and Danny Joy. Danny's here with me. They are the property owners. It's a family that owns the property, as you probably recall. And I also have John Lemmerman. He did the survey and prepared the plan that accompanied the rezoning petition. And I know that there were some questions last time about some setbacks, so we asked John to be here so that he could answer any questions that you might have specifically regarding the property. Briefly, I would just like to say that, as you're aware, we're still talking about the rezoning petition. We're also talking about a potential text amendment. And so I think we got into the weeds a lot last time on the rezoning in a good way, and fleshed out a lot of concerns and questions about that. I'm obviously here and happy to answer any additional questions that you have about the rezoning petition. I do think that this still is a strong case for an individual rezoning to the business general. As we stated last time, the intent and goal of the Joy family is just to continue using this property the way that it has historically been used for that service garage, minus the fuel station that used to be a component there, obviously. And so I think there was some concern last time about this being one of the only, if not the only, property that's zoned in that zoning district, the BG district in the town. And I took a little bit of a harder look at the uses that the BG district allows for. And I think I said it last time, and I'll say it again, I really think that most of those uses, maybe even 98% of those uses, would never be able to occupy this site. This is such a small site. It is less than 1/4 of an acre. The building itself is a little bit under 2,000 square feet of floor area. And with that, combined with the potential for parking, most of those uses would never develop here, never be able to develop here, would never be able to meet the requirements, modern day requirements, especially related to stormwater management. And so I really think that the rezoning petition is still a valid request. I think it still meets the standard, and I would still ask you to consider passing along a favorable report and recommendation to the mayor and council under the rezoning petition. But I also, as we discussed last time, am aware of the potential conversation for the text amendment, and I've talked to Kevin and Joe about it both, and so I did bring one thing for you all. So I think most of you are very familiar with this site. Yeah, you wouldn't mind. I'm going to keep one from you. Thank you. I think most of you are very familiar with this site, but this site, the existing building has 3 service bays. And so in considering a potential text amendment to the BL zone, which would not change the zone, I would request that if you are not inclined to favorably recommend the rezoning petition, that you consider favorably recommending a text amendment along these lines to go to mayor and council simultaneously with your unfavorable recommendation on the rezoning petition, if you will. And so what I did is I just redlined your BL district. Okay, and what I did here,
I want you to go back for just a second. I
know that was a mouthful.
I want to catch what you just said. Okay.
If you are uninclined to favorably recommend on the rezoning petition,
The BG
rezoning petition,
Got it.
I would request that you consider passing along an unfavorable recommendation on that petition, if you're not going to recommend favorably, simultaneous with a favorable recommendation for a text amendment to the BL district.
And why the unfavorable? Why the request for the unfavorable versus a recommendation for the BL text amendment?
Well, I just assumed that you needed to move it forward, but I guess if you don't, then I have no problem with your suggestion.
Should I ask that of Joe then?
I'm gonna put Karen on the spot, who's listening in via Zoom, as to whether or not we would actually have to make an unfavorable recommendation on the rezoning petition while at the same time making a favorable recommendation on a text amendment.
What can be passed as no recommendation, it's just passed along.
We're listening.
So I would say that there's nothing that would require you to do that. It is just an option that's being provided that if the planning commission believes that the rezoning would not be met, that the change in mistake requirements haven't been met, that another way to continue the business would be to do a text amendment. And I think that's all that's really being stated here, is it gives you an option, but I don't think you have to do it simultaneously.
Okay.
You could take action on this and then alternatively, or in addition to, put forth a text amendment if you thought that was appropriate.
Thank you. That does answer my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Just.
No, I appreciate that clarification. I'm glad you asked the question.
Well, could I ask another
yes.
question? So in your assessment of 98% of the businesses that would not be eligible for a BG sort of zone, where was adult bookstore as a conditional use? When I drove by the property again, I had a concern that it's possible that you could put one in. I've never tried to cite an adult bookstore in any location before, but I wasn't sure if there was a parking requirement or stormwater management requirement or what have you. And one of the concerns that I have is that the council, if we approved a BG zone sort of thing, then it would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and wouldn't come back to the council. And we've never had, we don't have those. They're not allowed in a BL zone. And it's not the sort of charm or character that we're trying to build into our town, at least not from my vantage point, being a part of the council. So I'm sort of interested in your assessment there. Does that represent the 2% that would have been okay or not okay? I don't know what goes into a site process for that sort of location.
First, I'll say there's no intent to put an adult
I
bookstore for anyone listening.
I totally understand, but it's a conditional use.
Understood.
And-
Yes, I just wanted to be very clear that that's has never crossed our minds. That being said, I think, and please step in if you think I'm wrong, that there's a parking provision for general retail that requires 200% of the floor area, and for that reason, I'd say that I think that probably falls into the 98% because a lot of those more retail uses are going to come with a much heavier parking requirement, and this building itself is 2,000 square feet. The acreage is like 0.1 acres, so I would say to you pretty confidently that you could never accommodate the parking and all of the environmental requirements on a site this size for something of any general retail nature.
Okay.
So if I could just step in real quick, just for clarity's sake. So retail stores only require parking if they are over 2,000 square feet, which I don't know if this building is. So in that case, there wouldn't actually be any parking requirement.
Although your code does say, if you continue reading on, I think, again, tell me if I'm wrong, that in cases where something's not specifically called out for a parking requirement, that you can apply a similar requirement that's contained in those sections, because there's really only a list of 10 or 15 things with very specific parking requirements, but then under that there's kind of a catch-all that says if you're not any of these things, we can apply a very similar or something we deem similar parking requirement.
Right.
And usually I would say for a retail use, you're going to be wanting enough parking to accommodate not only employees but customer traffic. So usually you're seeing a much higher parking requirement, and I think in that case it would be reasonable of staff to request that as part of a site plan. That's
I hate
my
to belabor
long-winded response to the adult bookstore.
I hate to belabor the point, but it's an important one to me. Who would make that decision? Would it be the Board of Zoning Appeals, or would it be the council if we wanted to add a requirement to a building more than 2,000 square feet? How would that work?
So if there's no parking
Or less.
requirement, then the Board of Zoning, or no one would really be able to come in, and Jay, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but no one would be able to come in and say, okay, there's no parking requirement here, but we're gonna make you add parking anyway. Because there's no real good determination to say, okay, where's the limit? Do we require them to have 2 spaces? Do we require them to have 100 spaces because maybe someone doesn't actually want the thing, so they're just gonna, make an arbitrary determination of 100 spaces. So if there's no requirement, then they don't have to provide parking. It would just be up to the property owner.
I would respectfully disagree and say that you could probably you are the one with the authority. Whoever
So
sits
if we assigned it out,
The parking requirements fall in the BL district, specifically fall under the purview of the planning commission. So you all get to make the determination whether or not the market is being met with that particular use, if it's not specifically listed in our parking use chart. So there are certain uses that have, specific requirements. The one in the BL district is retail under 2,000 square feet, just doesn't have a standard. So now you could apply a standard to it if you wanted to, but at the end of the day, there's nothing specific in our code that says you have to have X number of parking spaces.
And again, any type of site plan or permit after the fact under, for example, a text amendment to BL is going to come in front of the planning commission anyway.
Yes.
I'm not worried about BL, I'm worried about BG and the conditional use associated with the BG. And that's why I'm asking the questions, because how normally I'm used to the process working is that the town council and the mayor will say, hey, we want something to go to the planning commission and we want them to weigh in on various parameters. So we've done that in this particular matter. And I was wondering, would parking become a part of that? It does have bearing on how I would go forward myself with the BG zoning question. That's why I'm asking.
Any use in the BG district wouldn't go to council at all.
Okay.
So again, there would be no council play in that, assuming it's already been zoned that.
Yeah.
Now, if you're like we are here, obviously a recommendation here to change the zoning from a parcel from BL to BG would go to council for ratification. But outside of that, once we get to specific uses or parking requirements or conditional uses, none of that would come back to council.
Yeah. And again, please don't misinterpret that I'm thinking that you're going down this use category. I'm concerned about that particular conditional use.
Well, and not necessarily for what you plan to do, but 20 years down the road.
Understood.
Yeah.
Because this change is until zoning code changes here in town, so.
Yes.
Do you mind if I
No,
add something
please,
real
John, come on up here.
quick?
This is John Lumberman with RTF and Associates.
Good evening, John Lumberman. I just want to point out that will be a conditional use in the BG zone also, which would have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yeah.
And one of the things they look at is proximity of schools and everything. So with a school, I think that chances of just.
Good point, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's,
The principal permitted use that would
Thanks,
be
John.
big concern.
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what you have in front of you is me just copying and pasting your code into Word and then redlining it. And what I'm proposing here is a text amendment to the BL district that would allow for this shop to continue as a permitted use, and because it calls out service bays as a size difference that in some cases could be permitted and in some cases could be conditional. And specifically at the very bottom of the first page, what you see is a red line that adds service garage with 3 or less service bays as a principal permitted use. And then you see in the conditional use at the very end of the last page, you see a red line that adds service garage with more than 3 service bays as a conditional use in the BL district. I would ask that you consider this as a potential alternative to what staff is suggesting in the staff report in terms of a text amendment. I do think a service garage, especially the way it's defined in your code, is something that is appropriate in the BL district. I think we talked about this a little bit during the last meeting because it really does serve the needs of a local neighborhood community, especially one that is smaller in size. And so that's why I think it can be appropriate, and some jurisdictions make differences in terms of overall retail use or other uses based on the size. So that's why I thought that could be an appropriate way to differentiate a smaller, real community, local, if you will, service garage with a bigger potentially chain sort of service garage. And that would also allow the Joys to continue with a site plan process if and when a text amendment were ever adopted. Of course, that has to be adopted by mayor and council, but if and when a text amendment of this nature were adopted, it would allow the Joys to go through a site plan process to continue with their journey of finalizing the approvals for the site without going through a Board of Zoning Appeals process. I think a lot of the things that were mentioned in Kevin's staff report in terms of the powers of BZA and the conditions that the BZA has the authority to put on certain decisions, a lot of those, as it relates to this site, can be addressed by Planning Commission very appropriately, I think, in terms of parking, site distance, any sort of buffering, landscaping that's desired. A lot of those are elements that are traditional and normal for you all to consider as part of a site plan process. And so I think to the extent that there are concerns about this site that along those lines, those can all be addressed through a normal site plan process. So that's why I've provided this to you. So I would ask you to consider, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions about delineating some sort of size difference to call out a smaller service garage as something that's permitted in the BL and something larger as a conditional use in the BL district.
I had one question from the last discussion. I wasn't here, but I did I watched it via video. How long has the property been at that location and functioning as this business? I had mentioned it in the last council meeting, but I might have gotten it inaccurate. I thought I heard 1917 is what the date was, but maybe I got that incorrect.
No, I believe that is correct.
And it's been servicing as like a gas station since 1917, and then...
Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So it's always been an automotive shop that sold gasoline ever since it was started. We have local members of the community that have pictures of it from the 40s and 50s as being in the same building, the same automobiles in it, with little tiny gas pumps. And then our father purchased it in the mid-70s.
Okay.
And he's owned it ever since then. It's always been an automotive shop, and that's what we like to continue doing.
But a few years ago, or more than that, the tanks were taken out of the ground for the fuel station use.
So the town of Sykesville recommended the tanks be removed. Dawn
Asherbacher, former town manager.
She recommended the tanks be removed, and as well as MDE did. We either had to do a large amount of upgrades, but the town also recommended that they didn't really want the tanks to be there either. So that's kind of why they ended up being removed, which then, unbeknownst to us, pushed us out of...
Into a non-conforming use at the time, I think.
Yes.
Because with the fuel station, the service was just accessory to the fuel station and was allowed.
Yeah.
Once the fuel station went away, it was no longer accessory, and therefore it was not allowed in that district.
So is it okay if I ask?
Yeah, go for it.
So one other thing that I was doing was I just sort of drove around the whole town, right, and in all the BL zone, and I noticed that there's a couple of other automotive locations, and I'm looking at maybe Kevin and Joe for this. There's one on Sandusky that is, I think, called Sykesville Car Service. Don't quote me if that's exactly the name or not. And it has more than 3 bays. It's in a BL zone. Do we have any history in reference to that particular location? And if it's already been talked about, I apologize. I just don't know what it is.
And so we did talk about it a little bit this morning, and I dug through our old files and did my best to find any sort of documentation that showed when and how that was approved. Unfortunately, I couldn't come up with anything. The best we could find is, based on the county data, that the building was built in 1990, and how the business itself got approved almost 35 years ago. Unfortunately, I couldn't come up with anything. I did dig through the old files, old BZA cases, planning commission stuff, and unfortunately couldn't find anything. So it's hard to say really how that got approved as its current business. Unfortunately, the record keeping just wasn't top notch.
I understand. We've come a long way in the last few years to help with our record keeping and putting things digitally. I totally understand. Do we know the last time that this code was updated? Was it in between 1990 and now? I just don't know the answers.
There have been tweaks to it.
It says it in here, right, amended
Okay.
2016.
There's been a good amount of
My
tweaks and
bad if I
changes
didn't
to
see
it.
Yeah, there's a couple notes that are like different, adding,
Okay.
especially in the conditional uses, there's a bunch of adds.
Guess they came, they were out.
And then
So,
there's,
so it's possible that there was something in the code before and then it could have been removed, and we just don't know that that's the case?
It's possible, and again, we might have some documentation around here somewhere that does show that, but again, just couldn't track it down. But yeah, that is certainly a possibility that it was a conditional use at some point, and was later removed, but we just can't say for sure at this time.
Yep.
And I mean, Kevin mentioned it in his staff report that there are some other service garage locations, so he and I also spoke about it. And it's my understanding, again, tell me if I'm misstating this, that those would remain non-conforming as they are today. If they ever closed and then wanted to reopen, redevelop as that use, then if, depending on what text amendment is adopted, they would then need to potentially go through the BZA process to get approval for those sites.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was gonna ask if your, I forget your name, I'm sorry. John. If you had anything that you wanted to bring forth, I don't know if she gave you a list of questions that we had, kind of.
I just explained to John that there were some questions about the setbacks in the BL and the BG zones specifically, and asked that he just take a look at the plan for those and pencil in some measurements on his copy, so he can share that with you,
Don't
or
mind.
you can ask him specific questions that you have, but we're here and ready for you.
If you wouldn't mind about those setbacks.
Okay, so I don't have a formal report here, however, as far as the business local bulk regulations, as far as setbacks are concerned, which were hard to find, I must say, in the code. They're like attachment links somehow. So the other principal permitted or conditional uses in that zone has a front yard setback of 35 feet. So in this case, on this particular property, it's facing basically the intersection. So if you call either side, I don't know what you want to call front in this town, but as far as like Springfield Avenue, that setback from the corner of the building to the right-of-way line of State Highway is 11.5 feet. I think most people would probably assume that would be the front. So that would not be compliant as far as current zoning setbacks. However, I don't know, the building probably predates zoning setbacks. The side yards are 10 feet, and we do meet side yard setbacks, so that's not an issue. And then the rear yard, it's 10 feet normally. However, if it's joining a residential district, it's 25 feet. And we are between 24.5 and 25 feet to the rear.
And that's
to the back
including
property
to the back of the that railroad strip.
Yeah, that's
because the Joys own that, so that
correct.
measurement is running to the rear of that property.
That's where the fence line is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, yeah, just the other side of it. And then the business general have a little bit more greater setback requirements. The front is also 35 feet, so they're both the same as far as front setbacks are concerned. The BG is 25 feet side yards, so that would be non-compliant, I guess, to the current setbacks. And then the rear is 15 and also has the same 25 foot the residential. So it's basically the only difference is the sides are compliant in the BL zone and the BG that's not. That's all.
I have a few kind of comments, questions, primarily for the town, I think. I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So I'm looking at the BL zoning district, and I notice that it has in permitted uses, lost it. Of course I did. Sorry, conditional uses, it has automobile accessory. Do we know what that is exactly?
So we've talked about that. We kind of make that out to be like a retail
Got it.
shop that sells, automobile accessories, air fresheners, different.
Would tires be considered automobile accessory, do we know?
I think you can make that argument.
Okay.
They could fall into that.
Got it. And then it does list here, service stations.
So service station, noted that, that's in the staff report from last time too. So the service station is more or less how our code defines a gas station.
Got it.
So the primary use of a service station is dispensing motor fuels.
Got it.
So that's.
Okay. And then,
Could it also be something where you do some sort of automotive repair as well?
Yeah, so you can have a repair component to a service station, but that is only incidental to the primary use, which is dispensing motor fuels.
got it. I'll further go in that to prohibited uses. Tattoo parlors, adult video stores, psychic reading establishment, car wreck and automobile repair shops. So, and a BL, prohibited use.
Repair yards, correct?
Car wreck repair yards, excuse me. If I said shops, I apologize.
Yeah, so for us that means like a junkyard, so to speak.
And then there's, in the BG, under the current BG, there is no mention of any auto repair shops, either prohibited or conditional, correct, or permitted, correct?
Permitted in the BG.
It's the second one down.
There we go, sorry, apologize, okay. Thank you. Got it. And your point was get it 3 bays or below, so it's and put that in the permitted, allowed uses under BL, and anything above that not be, and have that be a conditional use, correct?
Correct.
So that would, if we did that, that would force the other garage that's in town, that if they were to close and reopen, they would have to go through the conditional use approval.
Well, and if it's not mentioned at all, it's going to go through the conditional use process.
Anyways.
Yeah,
Right.
regardless of it. If we do it under, unless I'm wrong, if we do it under a text amendment to the BL zoning, they're going, if there's any type of site plan change or I guess permit, is that correct? They have to come back in front of.
If there's gonna be a building permit applied for?
Yes.
Yes, they're supposed to come back before planning commission with a site plan.
Okay. Got it. And otherwise, it is just BZA then, correct? Under conditional use.
For the use itself, yes.
Yes, for the use itself.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Does anybody have anything else?
I want to, actually, something in driving the site, I think it's important just to note, at least, I don't think this is the time or the forum for it necessarily, but I heard a lot of talk from both the community and the Planning Commission about several things as it relates to the site. Sight lines, safety, children for the school crosswalk, as well as some environmental concerns as well. One of the things I think that I know from being on this table for years is we would strive for connectivity throughout the town. And that site is missing a sidewalk, which I think would go a long way to solving a number of the community concerns and some of the sight lines and certainly safety concerns, certainly given its proximity to the middle school. But I think that's doable at that site. I don't think this is necessarily the time for that because we're just talking about a text amendment. We can't make that or a change in zoning. But I think that's very important for the council to understand and the Board of Zoning Appeals to understand when if that does come in front of the BZA, that's something that would probably need to happen. I'm not sure if it's part of the Main Street project or not, doing sidewalks up there, but I think that's something important to at least get on the record for this body and any future body who takes this up.
And I will say, staff is also aware of the same concerns, which is one of the reasons that we think of, purely conditional use would be a good idea because it would give them the opportunity to address all those concerns through, through the BZA where they can set these special conditions, and then, to make sure that sight lines are being adhered to, pedestrian safety is being prioritized, materials are being screened, all that can be set as special conditions to approval of the use. And then the site plan process here would make sure that, they're actually meeting those conditions through the way that they lay out their sites.
Thank you.
So again, that's why staff thought that a conditional use would be an appropriate approach here.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Anybody from down here? Good. So I guess, do we want to make a move to make a recommendation to town council?
I feel comfortable with doing so. If
Okay.
you guys want to hear that, I'll flush it out first. And
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt these guys. I think they should be able to operate the commercial business there with certain guidelines. I've certainly heard the community, heard obviously their plea and the community appeals as well for safety. That's why I wanted to get the sidewalk information at least on the record here today. However, I think personally the best way to move forward is a conditional use under the BL zoning district. I would recommend to stay silent on 3 bays or under, just so it can come back to the BZA and potentially the Planning Commission for any of those site-related conditions that should be met to meet the needs of our community. So I would make a recommendation for a BL zoning as a conditional use to the BL zoning district without any differentiation of size.
Right.
And so just so I'm clear what you're recommending, you're saying essentially add in service garage. Is that the name of it, or is it something else?
I don't know how we want to
Are you adding it as a
Whatever.
specific use, or you just want to
Conditional
easy
use.
conditional use
Okay.
to the BL
Okay.
zoning district,
Gotcha.
which
Okay.
is 180.
right?
It's 18062 would be where it would fall into our code.
Yeah, so we're looking to try and basically kind of grandfather this kind of thing back in and not let.
I don't know if grandfather is the
Not
right
the right word. I know it's not the right
terminology I would use, but I certainly see their need and desire
right, right,
and to go with that business, and I think that is the best way to move forward,
Right.
to grant what their desire is, but also gives control to the town.
No, I'm with you. I'm not using the right term. That's
Yeah,
all.
how it would happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because you don't want it to go to every other.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess I will try to make sure that I get this correct here.
I mean, it's.
I think it's pretty much what you laid out, right? So, I'd like to make a motion.
Well, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Before you make a motion.
Okay, sorry.
As part of that, we can
Yeah.
deal with the rezoning request as well, just to say, we think the better way to move forward, rather than rezoning the property to a business general, would be to offer a text amendment in its place.
Okay.
Can I stop you there?
go ahead.
Sorry to do so. So, with what the town is getting ready to go forward with as it relates to zoning, might this be the best way forward currently?
As it relates to our review of the overall zoning ordinance, this
Bingo,
is
yes.
still the best way to move forward.
Okay. Does it limit the town in any potential zoning code changes overall through this process?
No. Anything we do here is not going to affect some sort of comprehensive review that we do in the future.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. That's positive then.
Could you say what you said one more time? Sorry.
I'll put it differently.
This is
Mayor
my
and
first
council can adopt any text amendment they want at any point in time. So even if they pass this, in theory, 2 months from now, in 6 months from now, if they hated it, they could change it again. They're the legislative power. So
I'll just say, as part of the motion, just make a comment towards the requested zoning change, like the actual zoning map amendment, is not considered the best path forward.
Okay.
That, as an alternative, we would recommend adding a service garage as a conditional use under the BL district.
Okay. All right. So now, are we good?
So moved.
So now
I'll make the motion, I agree.
second.
Actually, I think he has to say it, there's somebody up here now.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to make a motion to add the service garage as a conditional use under the business local zone. And as part of this offer, this is the best plan as an alternate to serve in. I'm gonna mess this up. There's so much here.
It's okay.
This is the best path forward as an alternate to the zoning land change from business general or business local to business general. I think I got that. Okay.
That's it.
That'll work, you guys can wordsmith it, right?
Okay.
I'll make, yeah.
I'll second.
Motion.
I was gonna say it's my motion, right?
Second, whatever we need to do.
Third it.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Unanimous. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back for mayor and council.
Okay, so that was the zoning petition. The next business agenda item is the 2024 meeting schedule approval. That is the one thing I forgot to print out. Everything that I printed out.
So, I'll say our main concern with this is looking forward to next month's meeting, January 2nd. So the first Monday is obviously New Year's Day, so we don't anticipate being here that day. So we were planning on Tuesday, January 2nd, and just wanted to make sure we would at least have a quorum for that meeting. And then other than that, it's the first Monday of every month minus September, which is also would also fall on a Tuesday due to a holiday.
Okay, that's Labor Day this year?
Yeah.
Or this coming year?
So I could potentially be in some sort of a travel status on January 2nd. I'd be available any day later that week, but I might be in a travel status that day.
Would anyone else not be available on the 2nd? That you know of? Yeah, it's the day after New Year's.
Our daughter's going back to college that day. I'm just not sure if I'm going to go up and take her or not.
So I'm good that day. Does anybody else have an issue?
We just wanted to make sure we had a quorum.
Okay, so I think we'll have a quorum then.
Yeah.
Okay, so January 2nd is good.
Yep.
And then September 3rd, I mean, I think, does anybody have any? Looking forward to 2024, September 3rd.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
We were mostly concerned about
So-
January, but.
okay. So, I'll
Motion to approve.
make a motion to approve the 2024 meeting schedule?
Second.
Got
Who was it? Ted?
Whatever.
Okay.
And I'm abstaining.
This kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10.
Okay.
And with that, I guess town updates, the last thing on the,
So, I mean, there hasn't been much since last month, just the same thing. We're still waiting on county comment letters for the Enclave subdivision as well as the Squelch Road subdivision. So, we'll see. Hopefully, we'll start getting some stuff over the course of December, and it might be on the agenda for January, but we'll see. You know, they have a lot of stuff to work through, especially when it comes to stormwater grading and things like that. So, just waiting for county comments before we bring that before the planning commission again.
So work is progressing.
Work is progressing, yeah. So last time I spoke to the representatives from Enclave, it was early November, I believe, and they said that they resubmitted their plans based on the initial round of county comments. So now they're just waiting for the second round of county comments. So it is moving.
Have we heard anything about the berm that they're thinking of putting in as you travel up 32 in terms of any changes to that?
We haven't seen any
haven't
specific
seen
changes yet. No.
Okay. Great.
all right. Well, with that, I move to adjourn. Meeting. So, meeting adjourned. There we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Good job.
Give me the.